if you want something, is it okay to just take it? Venezuela expropriated U.S. oil assets in 2007, and in 2026, the U.S. finally retaliated by expropriating Venezuela. Well, not all of it, but what does U.S. control of Venezuelan oil mean for the U.S., specifically companies here dealing with oil, and with Donald Trump now confirming that, quote, all options, including military action, are on the table to take Greenland? What does this new might makes right world order mean for investors? We'll talk about this, about the biotech and pharma boom, China's rare earth economic warfare on Japan, and three stocks we like on this edition of the Curia Investment Show. As always, I am joined by Owen Tracy of Fuller Tracy Money. Owen, welcome as always.
It's always a pleasure.
And I'm going to try to unhide Xiaoping Wang of Curia Financial just to say hi, Xiaoping. You're going to come back on later and join us with a stock idea. But for now, you're just going to wish, I guess, from the sidelines. So I'm going to hide you, Xiaoping, and we'll go back to the story. So good news first, as I attempt to share my screen. One second here. It's a slow old guy with technology. The U.S. has a new food pyramid. The old one, it turns out, was a result of a lot of lobbying from the grain industry, and it ended up with 70% of Americans obese or overweight. It's just not healthy to eat so many carbs. Politically, this is not a political show. I don't necessarily agree with everything RFK Jr. says and does, many things I vehemently disagree with, but I do like his approach to avoiding processed food. So I personally cheer the new food pyramid, even if it's not totally perfect. Owen, do you have any thoughts on this? I know it's off business, but it's something in the news.
Well, I guess, look, I mean, personally, my body weight has fluctuated like a yo-yo over the last 30 years. I've been as high as 220, as low as 160. And mostly it's because I get religion and I adopt a food pyramid just like they have announced. And then I stray and I make excuses for myself. I end up on the other pyramid. So, I absolutely understand, that this is the new food pyramid that everybody really should be adhering to. And unfortunately, the fact is that sugar is highly addictive. And we have, as a society, come up with myriad of different ways to hide it and to put it into every kind of product available. The sharp, unfortunate reality is if it comes in a package, it's bad for you. That's the long and the short of it. So, the more whole foods, the more things that you can consume that are natural, the better it is for you. That's an uncomfortable fact. And unfortunately, all the things that are bad for us taste good.
Yep, so true. And in nature, evolutionarily, we just didn't have that much access to those tasty things. So we could eat them, whenever we found a few blueberries, great, they're sweet, right? But we just, you can't get fat off blueberries. But you certainly get fat off pie, off all kinds of and pie is probably not even nearly as bad as stuff that comes in a bag. In Philippines, and I'm rambling, but Philippines is the heart disease capital of Asia, and I lived there for a while, and it was sad for me to go into grocery stores there because they'd basically been invaded by all the Western packaged food companies. Like half the store is Doritos and Oreos, and I mean it's bad enough here in the USA, and over there it's just sad to see exporting American obesity, and yes, people aren't doing it deliberately, but it's just become such a thing. So I'm glad to see this deliberate effort. I think we got this right. On the food pyramid for a change. So positive news on that front. All right, so back to investing, although not necessarily to a positive story. Let's talk about Venezuela. Oh, and you had a great write-up in that you mentioned how the inventor of rugby invented it just by randomly grabbing a soccer ball or football, if you're watching in the UK, and just ran around, which is totally forbidden, but he did it anyway, and somehow it became the game of rugby. And that was analogous to what Donald Trump is now doing in terms of his foreign policy. Now, we'll talk about the big picture ramifications in a minute, but more directly, let's ask, is it a gold mine for these U.S. oil companies now or is it a white elephant? I was reading, Owen, that I mean, Chevron, first of all, is owed $8.7 billion from Venezuela from multiple international arbitration judgments. It seems like it's more likely to get that money now from prior expropriations. On the other hand, with oil at 50 or $60 a barrel roughly, the majors don't seem to be rushing in. I read that the output of Venezuela, despite having the world's largest proven or proved, depending on which vernacular you like to use, that's gone back and forth over the years, reserves. I'm going to show this graphic here. They actually have the daily output of 1.1 million barrels a day, which is the same as the U.S. state of North Dakota. In other words, they have oil. They have oil, but they're pathetic at getting out of the ground. And one consulting group said even to maintain that pathetically low output is going to cost $53 billion over the next 10 years. So I guess my question is, what do you think this is or isn't in terms of an economic opportunity for American companies?
I think you can kind of really condense it all into two things. One is sunk cost, and the other is uh, trying to choke off money to different groups. So, sunk cost, Chevron has all of these investments in Venezuela. And the USA and Venezuela had a very comfy relationship for a very long time. So, there are heavy oil refineries in the Texas, Louisiana coastlines. They have to be fed with heavy crude.
Yep.
Well, heavy crude comes from Venezuela. Heavy crude comes from the tar sands in Canada. Now, at the moment, a lot of that heavy crude is rail carred from Canada all the way down to Texas. When you go back and think about all of the controversy that was going on about the XL pipeline, and that was something that became heavily political, that was mostly about moving that heavy crude to Texas. Well, that's not really happening. You have all of these refineries. It costs an incredible amount of money to change what they do. So you get your heavy crude from Venezuela. Now you get to feed your refineries. Now, it doesn't really matter whether the USA is an importer or an exporter of crude or refined products. But for those refineries, they really can't be fed with light crude or Texas tea. They need that heavy. So this is where Chevron and Exxon have an advantage here. They're going to benefit from getting any kind of production out of Venezuela. So that is one factor, that it's not about how much is going to be produced. It's about the kind of oil that's going to be produced. So
Got it.
that's going to.
We can refine that, but I mean, there's still the problem of getting it out of Venezuela. And if I'm a U.S. company, I'm not sure who's going to run Venezuela in a year or so, right? I mean, it just seems like, and this economically, it seems like a mess, right? Am I being too bearish here? Like, doesn't someone have to come in and kind of like manage this on the other side to get the extraction done?
Yes, that's absolutely true. And that is why you have President Trump talking with several of the oil executives and talking to them about a patriotic duty. Now, if you're encouraging people with a patriotic duty, it really means that the economics isn't great,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and you're asking them to have faith. Now, I think that at least they're on the very initial evidence, because I mean today is Friday, and the abscondment or the invasion only took place last Saturday, but I think they have learned some lessons from Iraq. And the big mistake that happened in Iraq was they disbanded the entire government, they stopped paying the soldiers, and then they seeded just this incredible insurgency. That was a big mistake. Now, they're not doing that this time. I think this time around, what they're trying to do is to keep the country running and prolong the transition, try to do it right this time. But that also means it's going to take a year. It might take several months to get the kind of new conditions underway. It might take a year to get an election. And in that period of time, there needs to be confidence building measures. So they're going to have to invest in the oil infrastructure, because What Venezuela needs more than anything
And who's
is
they? Who's
money.
they? Who's they? The patriotic U.S. majors?
The patriotic U.S. majors, the CIA, the State Department, the U.S. government, they need to make sure that this does not devolve into Iraq, that we do not get massive insurgency, that we don't get the kind of rebel groups that evolved in Colombia, for example, because those were essentially they were originally funded as a way to try and keep down communism. Then they turned to drug dealing, and they took over an area of Colombia about the same size as Switzerland. Now, if that were to happen again in Venezuela, it would be quite a problem. So we're talking about real risk that this could devolve into a very, very messy situation. So when we talk about what needs to be done, I mean, it is a gargantuan problem that could be solved, but could also go very wrong. And that also means it's going to be very costly.
I could not agree with you more. Moving into countries and displacing the government and trying to rectify things sounds good in theory, but it has proven to be exorbitantly expensive. And even if everything goes right, it's still very likely a very long term and very costly thing that the USA is attempting to do here.
And of
Well, one
course,
nomenclature
there
thing.
is an
Yeah, go ahead.
additional point, though. There's one other thing to consider. Maybe they don't want regime change. We all are sitting here thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be a new democratic country. What happens if that's not the case? What happens if they just want the oil? They just want the oil to flow. They want to control where Venezuela's money goes, and they're willing to accept that the current administration will just sit there as a takeholder government.
And they might want that. Not that I'm overly jaded, but a democratic regime does what it wants, and I don't know that Donald Trump necessarily wants that. Maybe he wants someone who's just kind of a Trump loyalist who's going to keep the status quo and keep giving him the oil. So maybe they don't actually want democracy, but who knows? And maybe that's a conspiracy theory. One nomenclature thing I was going to mention. You mentioned invasion. It's funny you mentioned that word because it was either Polymarket or Kalshi said they had $10.5 million in bets on an invasion, a U.S. invasion of Venezuela, and they had to decree that technically this was not an invasion. This was like I'm not going to use the word kidnapping, but it was some kind of non-invasion military action. Basically, it's kind of whatever it was. They deemed it not an invasion. So interesting nomenclature difference here.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly an adventure.
yeah. So one random question, and Xiaoping, I want to bring you in for your opinion on this very quickly. If you're there, hopefully you're there and not indisposed. So let me just share the screen here. So this is like my highlight of the Venezuela issue. So I found this picture of Maduro, orange shoes. I've never seen orange shoes before. Thumbs up, Xiaoping, or thumbs down on these shoes? You're more fashionable than I am. It's thumbs down. Okay. Owen, do you have a view on the orange shoes?
No, I
Thumbs
like
up.
his
Okay.
drip. Yeah.
Yeah. I Googled, nobody's talking about this. They're talking, I said orange shoes and then some orange jumpsuit popped up, but no, that's not what I mean. I mean, literally the orange shoes. And so I guess we're the first to discuss the matter. So, all right. That was quick and maybe not too deep of a topic. But speaking of this, Owen, let me share something else because this is, something. So Venezuela is one piece, right? It's what's happening right now. But then there's kind of the principle of the matter, which is what's going on with this foreign policy. You wrote, and I agreed. I mean, this was not. It doesn't seem to be the most lawful of actions. Congress wasn't even briefed about it; it just kind of happened, and so we have here on Kalshi at least almost a 41% chance betting odds that the U.S. will take any part of Greenland. I don't know what the time period is, but 40.7%, that's pretty high. And these tend to be somewhat accurate. And again, Trump said he'd use military force if necessary. Now, whether or not, I mean, hopefully that doesn't happen. I mean, the Danish have been our allies, that they've sent troops to fight American wars in foreign lands to support Americans. So it's just kind of shocking to me personally that this would happen. And I doubt we would use the military, but it begets a broader question: is what's going on? I mean, are we increasingly just in a might makes right world. That would seem to mean a deglobalized world. That would seem to mean a world where we invest maybe less in foreign companies. What's your broad take? I know this is a really big topic, but what's your read on this?
Well, one of the things that has been achieved by the, I guess, capturing of Maduro and just how surprising it was is now everything's on the table. And the USA can threaten to take Greenland by force and be taken semi seriously. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do it, but everybody now has to consider that it's not an idle threat. And that already raises the ante. And if you think about, how President Trump has talked about negotiating, well, you go in with a big ask and then you'll settle for something less. So I would say that the taking over Greenland by military force is the big ask. But what they would probably settle for is a deal. Now, what exactly do we have in Greenland? Well, there's a lot of ice. There's about 55,000 people, and they mostly want to be independent of Denmark. They feel like that they were really badly treated by the Danish government. And there is this whole controversy, and it's really a scandal that there were large numbers of young women were sterilized because they were, and the Danish government have only just apologized for that. So I think that 55,000 people on Greenland, they would much prefer to be independent. But an independent country where it's double the size of Alaska, I mean, that's a substantial piece of land for a small number of people to hold. And it's in a geographically, militarily important place. Well, I think the USA would probably settle for having exclusive rights to military encampments in large areas of it, in much the same way that they have in several other locations around the world. And I think that might be the lowest ask. Now, there is an additional way of thinking about it. They might say, well, Russia is now using intermediate range ballistic missiles to attack Western Ukraine. They did that yesterday. Now, if we are talking about additional support for Ukraine and getting much more involved, well, would the USA use that as a quid pro quo and say, okay, if you want much more support from us to really get a handle on this war in Ukraine, well, in return for that, we want Greenland. That's also a possibility.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you on this. I think that's how Trump is thinking. I think it is hopefully a big taco trade. I guess I don't agree that it's the right thing to do personally. And again, we're an investment show, not really a political show. But if I go to borrow sugar from my neighbor, maybe I bring a gun and threaten or ask for something, he's going to give me more sugar if there's a threat there. But like, that's not good for neighborly relations, right? It doesn't make the U.S. a credible partner. It scares people. It's just kind of, it seems unstable and not respecting of international laws and norms. So, I don't know that it's good for the world, but I think the positive, as you mentioned, is that the odds of a U.S. military action in Greenland they have less than 200 miles of roads. I heard are pretty minimal. But to your point, also, I heard some podcasts. The lady was from the CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies, that in general it takes about 18 years between when mineral assets are found in the ground and when they're actually being mined. In the U.S., it takes 28 years because we have so much bureaucracy. Now, maybe it would go faster in Greenland, but if minerals are to be extracted from Greenland, you probably do need the U.S. there in a big way. But it's also not a quick solution on the other side of that coin.
Well, I think, mining assets, they really depend on infrastructure. And the reason it takes a long time is because you need to sign the royalty agreements, you need to build the roads, you need to build the mine. All of that can happen really fast. If you have plenty of money and you have regulatory, basically
Yeah,
the
if you're
regular
threatening military action, I guess you can move quickly. Yeah.
military action, you can get it done really fast. And the nice thing about Greenland is it's virgin territory. So We're talking about grades, mine grades that are much higher than you would find elsewhere, because as the ice recedes, then you're really talking about virgin mining territory that's never been explored. There's a really small number of companies that are currently in Greenland. And, there's one is Amarok, and that was originally looking to be a gold mine. They announced about 3 months ago that they've also found rare earth metals. And they've got a very large,
Interesting.
exploration project. So, you know, that is a gold mine that doesn't actually move in line with the gold price at all, because it is so small, and because it's really more of an exploration company.
And I heard that a lot of the minerals there are a lot of the mining, it's seldom just for one thing. Sometimes it is, but uranium tends to be baked into a lot of the earth there. So when you're mining for rare earths, you're almost certainly taking out uranium as well. So you probably don't want bad guys there doing that mining. You do want a good guy country, for better or for worse. Well, we'll see what happens. What are your own odds over the next year of the U.S. having control of some piece of Greenland land, not just a contractual deal, but some kind of that basically the Kalshi bet, 48.7%. Are you over or under on that?
I'd be under
Under.
in
Okay,
12 months.
I'm
Under.
with you. Yeah, I'm with you. I think cooler heads will eventually prevail on that. All right, so shifting gears, somewhat entirely, let's talk about pharma and biotech, and I'm going to share a graph. There are two big biotech ETFs, and they're this is the XBI. This is the equally weighted ETF. And as you can see, since roughly May of last year, it's up 40%, pretty handily outperforming the S&P 500. And if we go to the cap weighted one, we basically see kind of the same thing. IBB is the ticker there. So largely the same. And the pharmaceutical ETFs are maybe not quite up as high, but still up. And I think generally I've made the point that biotech is a risk asset, and in a climate where rates are going down or expected to go down, biotechs tend to go up. Uh, and there was a kind of a frenzy a couple of years ago in biotech where you had way too many companies vying for far too few FDA approval. FDA approves maybe 40, 45 new drugs in a year, and there were like 2,000 or 3,000 biotechs, and there's just no way that they were all going to get through that pipeline. We just had way too many, and some were trading below cash because of that. So there was kind of a washout. Rates were going up. Now we have the reverse happening. What more is there to the story?
I think there's two things. One is when you get a little bit of doubt about the chip sector, and there has been a bit of a wobble in chips. Well, the next place that people start to look for speculative assets is biotech. So biotech tends to go up when there's a little bit of doubt, or the chip sector goes down. And I think there's a little bit of that happening over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Now, there's an additional point that the range of innovation is just accelerating, and most of the focus of the biotech sector was vaccines during the pandemic. And that was the real big shakeout. You have something like Moderna, which was the largest company in the biotech sector, collapsed. And that took the entire sector with it. Whereas now we're seeing more of the immuno-oncology starting to come through. So then you're also starting to see that genetic sequencing companies and the blood biopsy companies are doing better. So we're entering a period where your personalized medicine is probably going to start coming back into the kind of the way that people talk. And you're starting to see more of the testing, and the unique kind of testing where you take a blood sample and you can find lots of different potential cancers with it. Those are the kinds of trends that are evolving now. And that's a really big bull market.
So yeah, we got a couple of catalysts, and we get more M&A too. Pharmas kind of go through cycles. We've got more political stability, whereas a year ago people were a lot more worried about that. Would you be a buyer? I showed some of the charts. I think the biotech XBI was up 40% over the past year. Do you think there's still room to run, or do you not have a view on the valuation?
Oh, I think there's room to run. I think that this is a breakout from a very long base. And we often see that at the very beginning of a new bull market, you get a big percentage gain, but it's really only just breaking out. So I guess I would be very bullish of the biotech sector.
My rule of thumb is when in doubt, don't bet against things related to healthcare. The world's getting older, spending more and more money on it, and the world's getting richer too, so it can afford that. Uh, let's do our final story now. I don't think I have a graphic to share here, but let's talk about China's rare earths. There's been, over the past couple of years, quite a lot of fuss in the sense of if China restricts rare earths, which they've done or threaten to do now and then, what are we going to do? Because 20, 30 years, 40 years ago, nobody wanted to touch them. Mining them is very dirty, environmentally damaging. And China was, hey, bring it on, we'll do this. So they developed the mining and the processing capacity. And now the world is kind of smarting from that. But more specifically, I want to say in November, the new Japanese Prime Minister, Sane Takaishi, I think her name, I forgot the pronunciation, but basically said that if China were to invade Taiwan, Japan would consider that an existential threat, and therefore it could be necessary for the Japanese to get militarily involved. And China did not like that. They have de facto banned dual use exports to Japan, dual use meaning consumer and military, including rare earths. Technically, it's a review process, but per the Wall Street Journal, uh, they're not even reviewing it. They're just denying it. So it's a de facto ban. China canceled a recent visit by Japanese business leaders. China told Chinese travel agencies not to book people on trips to Japan. And China started some anti-dumping investigations into Japanese exports. And there's probably other things that I'm not listing here. But the thing that surprised me, Owen, is that Nomura Securities said that this could cause $17 billion. I don't know why I air quoted that. $17 billion in economic losses to Japan over roughly the rest of the year. That seems pretty small, actually, in terms of a one of the biggest economies in the world. What do you think about this?
Well, you got to also remember that the original ban on rare earth metals back in 2011 also was between China and Japan. So back then,
And that was
Japan,
the island dispute thing, right? Was that the time at the time? I think.
I think it was the island dispute thing, and it was look. The reality is that whenever China is hurting internally, then they start to pick fights with Japan because it's an easy target. There's the rape in Nanjing, and that is something that is just culturally so important within China and South Korea, and that they're never going to let Japan forget that. So there will always be this sort of tension that erupts from time to time, which is mostly about internal politics rather than any real factoid that's going to kind of erupt into something important.
I just said one interruption. But when I was in one of the times I was in China on some message boards, some guy from China says, "Whenever I go to Japan, I deliberately leave the hotel faucet on hot, like full blast when I leave, just to get revenge." Right? Like that's how. I mean, it doesn't make sense, yeah, but that's how visceral this feeling is there. So sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
Well, now let's think. This happened 14 years ago. So Japan then went on a fairly big global search for rare earth metals. The reason that Linus is the only company that actually got from that original batch of companies that actually got up to refining and is now supplying the world with rare earth metals is because it got directly invested in by Japanese companies.
Hmm.
So they do have some of their own supply. And then of course, rare earth metals are bitsy. It's not like they're the major component in anything. They're just a necessary component. And it's a small piece of that. So they're never going to say, oh, this is going to cripple our economy, because that's really bad for optics. But it's just seriously inconvenient. And Japan also stockpiles rare earth metals because they know that this is always going to be a risk with China. I would say the bigger issue is for the rest of the world, that it's very real that we need to have minimum prices for rare earth metals. And that was what was agreed between the USA and Australia about 3 or 4 months ago. That if Australia develops their rare earth metals, then there will be a minimum price that will be agreed, so that when China does decide to flood the market in order to knock out all of the new producers, that they will remain economic. And this is actually good for the rare earth mining sector, because it
Mhm.
had a swinging pullback from the October peak. And now it's only just beginning to find support again.
Interesting. Yeah, the minimum price is, I mean, it's collusion, but in a good way, that preserve an industry, I suppose. I predict that we are not done with China rare earth drama, and it just takes a long time for capacity to come online elsewhere. But slowly but surely, it's happening. So would you be buying Japanese stocks right now? I mean, you think this is a nothing burger economically, or you think this is going to have more bite?
Well, I think Japan is in a big bull market because they keep devaluing their currency. So, Japan has been one of the best performing global markets for the last 3 or 4 years, and the yen has lost half of its purchasing power. So, that is the reason why you would buy Japan. I would be interested in buying some of the rare earth metal companies because I think this resource nationalism trend is not going away. If we are in a more geopolitically uncertain environment, then we are going to have a completely separate supply chain for key resources. And that's going to get built over the next decade.
Agree very much. And Japan was good enough for Warren Buffett a couple of years ago that that call proved very prescient. So maybe there's still room to run there. Speaking of investments, speaking of stocks that we like, let's bring in analyst shopping as soon as I click this button here, and let's wrap up with three stocks. One that each of us likes. Owen, I'll let you go first. What's one stock? And you can like it, dislike it, like it a little bit. Doesn't have to be like a blazing recommendation.
Um, the one that I like is Grail, and that is a blood biopsy company. And it's an interesting one because Illumina bought it. And then that would have created such a huge antitrust issue that the Europeans shot it down. And Illumina
Mhm.
wanted it so bad that they went ahead and merged anyway. And then the Europeans said, all right, we're not buying any of your machines anymore until you demerge. So Illumina bit the bullet and they demerged, and Grail was listed on the stock market about 18 months ago. Now, this is a company that specializes in blood biopsy, which
Mhm.
basically means is you take a blood sample and it will screen for over 20 cancers. And that is the kind of thing that's going to find its way into every doctor's office over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. So I think this is a big growth opportunity. And I think that it is just a longer term buy and hold.
Even after rising 453.89% the past year. Wow. All right. The market
Absolutely.
cap of, yeah, 3.83. I mean, it's small, but it's not that small. So it's a decent sized company now.
Well, it's a lot bigger than it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. 400 and something percent bigger. So cool. Grail. Grail is your stock. Uh, Xiaoping, what are you looking at this week?
I'm gonna go with Palo Alto Networks. The ticker is PANW. So,
Yep. Yep.
it's a cybersecurity company. The stock price is almost flat in 2025. This company started with like firewalls, and then is expanded into like a broader security platform that includes like network, cloud, and AI driven automation. So, the reason that I'm interested in this stock is that it is also now becoming like essential focus for businesses. The growth of like use of AI is also adding the new challenges of the cybersecurity. So one data break can be like extremely costly for a company. So and plus Palo Alto is more like a leader in this space. Um, so many companies are increasing their security budgets. Um,
But it sounds like in terms of why now. So everything you said makes sense. I mean, companies need security, but like that's been true for 15 years, 20 years. I mean,
yeah.
since cyber stuff became a thing, right? But it sounds
Mhm.
like this could be a partly a valuation play. It's basically flat or 8% up, which is not that's the market was up 17%. So this was what 40% of the market's return. It significantly underperformed the market
Yep.
over the past year is the
Mhm.
key point, right? And it sounds like you think its time will come.
Yeah, and
That's
also,
correct.
like, if the Fed has begun cutting the interest rates, like, this environment is more, like, better is better for companies like Palo Alto.
All right. Morningstar says Palo Alto undervalued by 17%. So Morningstar agrees with you too. Three best cybersecurity stocks. All right. Palo Alto Networks, PANW is your stock. I'm going to go kind of lowbrow on mine, kind of simplistic, but I was looking and saw that Novo Nordisk introduced this GLP-1 pill, which is not like quite as good as the injection, but you take it daily. And I think it's a lot easier, 150, $200 a month, which means it's affordable. I mean, it's kind of the same price as a nice gym membership. And for a lot of Americans, they'd much prefer a pill than to get injected. Now, I don't know how well the patent protection is going to work on this. What other competing pills will come out soon? But this could be something. I'm a believer in GLP-1 long term, and as you can see over the past year, when the S&P was up 17%. Novo was down roughly 30%. So by 47 percentage points, roughly, although we're 9 days into the year, roughly by 47 percentage points, it underperformed the S&P 500. So this could be a positive catalyst, but please do your own research. I'm not professing to be an expert in this area. This is just something that caught my eye, given the relatively low price of Novo Nordisk, and the high potential, at least as I see it, of pill form GLP-1. So all right. So Grail, Palo Alto Networks, and Novo Nordisk are our three stocks. Hope all these podcasts have been helpful to you. If you're watching, um, I'm shopping. I see a Price Waterhouse building behind you. Looks like you're in a business district there. Uh, so, guys, Xiaoping Wang of Curia Financial, Owen Tracy of Fuller Tracy Money. Thank you both, as always, for joining the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on and talk about all sorts of things, orange shoes included. And thanks to you guys, as always, for watching us at home.